Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Lit Up Lightworker podcast, bringing you fun and soulful interviews with spiritual teachers aimed at tuning you in and lighting you up. You can access all episodes of the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. And be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more videos and interviews all about finding and following your life purpose. My name is George Lizos. I'm a spiritual teacher, intuitive, the author of Be the Guru and the #1 best-selling Lightworkers Gotta Work. And today I have with me Kimberley Wenya. Kimberley Wenya is a manifestation and mindset mentor, your #1 source for manifestation based in science and truth. Whilst bridging the gap between the woo and manifestation for modern women, Kimberley manifested her 2018 vision that was going to take 5 to 10 years in just 2.5 years. She's the creator of the manifestation method, a solid science-backed process that aligns with universal laws to collapse time and manifest your desires. Kimberley, welcome to the Lit Up Lightworker podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here, George.
I am so excited to have you here to talk about one of my favorite topics, manifestation. And we're taking the angle of what is the science behind manifestation, which is something I'm personally so interested in learning more about. And I know people listening are so excited to learn because we hear about manifestation, the law of attraction in so many spiritual books, but I've never read or heard much about the science behind that. But before we dive into the nitty-gritty, I want to hear about your own story to doing this work in the first place. What got you started on your manifestation path?
Yes, so it started off with me just loving YouTube videos, and I just remember watching a couple of channels that were talking about law of attraction just because of the suggested, and I was like, okay, this sounds really interesting. I didn't do much for it until a couple years later, where I read a book called She Means Business with Carrie Green, and basically she talked about the law of attraction inside there, and I was like, hold up, I heard about this before, let me look into this more. And that's when I started to be ready to receive that information. And I know that one of your principles is when you're ready, that's when it shows up for you. So that's when I was like, okay, let me look into this. I said, universe, show me more information about the law of attraction and manifestation. And within a couple of weeks, I remember my mom texted me and she's like, hey, can you come to this op shop? She loves getting vases and vases from op shops to do flower arrangements. And as we went there, I said to her, hey, okay, this is random, but let me just have a look at the bookshelves. And as I did, I saw, everyone knows this book, The Secret. And that was the first kind of point of contact that I had with the law of attraction, because it's a very commercialized version of it. It's very widely distributed. There's a documentary about it. And so from there, I started to apply just what I was learning, but it started to be quite superficial. But I was like, let me just do with what I've learned, and then I can do my own research. So I started to apply what I knew and what I was learning, and I started to see there was something about me creating my reality. Like, things weren't just happening to me. Like, I had a say in what I was experiencing based on how I was feeling, what I was thinking. So I started to really go down this rabbit hole almost of discovering how I really do create my reality and how I could create my dream life. Now, 2 years down the track, I've manifested every single thing on my vision board, and it's through a really grounded way that I have now known is very based in science and has very solid principles. So that's basically my story on how it all kind of happened.
Oh my God, I love it. And I also started by reading The Secret. And I love that we all start there, and then we realize that's not actually the secret.
It's a lily pad, yeah.
Like that's the book, The Secret, and the documentary don't really share the actual secret behind manifestation.
Yeah.
It's like I mean, I'm so grateful to it, but it's a lot of like superficial stuff of like, oh, fake it till you make it, and all that.
Visualize.
Exactly. So I'm so excited to hear about the science behind manifestation. So in your experience, what is the science? How does it work from a scientific perspective?
Yeah, so I actually studied 2 bachelors of science. Not that we studied manifestation there, but I love it because it kind of gives me a different foundation on kind of looking into this and the quantum physics behind this. And I've learned from people like Dr. DeMartini, and also there's Joe Dispenza. They're really great teachers on this too. But in my own understanding, the way that I love to see it in a kind of modern way is that we as human beings, we are literally, ultimately, we are made out of atoms, right? And when we look at atoms, there are hypotheses, theories that physicists and scientists have come up with for us to understand and comprehend what this is. So when we look further at atoms, if we could actually see this, we can see that beyond atoms is subatomic waves and subatomic particles. Now, if you are familiar with studying light in high school, you would have heard that there are two theories surrounding light, the wave theory and the particle theory. And if we connect that to how we see that atoms are ultimately subatomic waves and particles, we can essentially say that we are light. And I know that you align with this so well because, you know, we are light workers, we basically are light beings. It's just really cool, right? So from there, if we kind of go along that line theoretically, we can look at how light behaves and start to see how we create our desires, manifestations, and our lives through that way. So I go into the intricacies of how the light theory and the light theories such as the wave theory and the particle theory interact with us in my program, Manifestation Basics. But ultimately, when we are thinking and feeling, we are sending out signals through our electromagnetic field out into the universe. And it's like when you have a radio, if you tune to a certain frequency, you're going to receive a certain channel. You're going to hear certain music or a voice on the other side. And it's the same thing, but for us in our physical realities, instead of listening to something on the other side, we actually have it appear in our physical reality, whether that's a person, a circumstance, an event. And that's how we create our ultimate life experience. So when you are feeling a certain way and thinking a certain way, it's like when this is what The Secret says, right? When you think of somebody, like you crazily bump into them like an hour later and you're like, what are the odds of this? Or maybe you're thinking about someone and they text you or they call you. Like this is those little weird coincidences, which could always be called synchronicity, which is basically kind of like a wink from the universe. Like, hey, you are creating your universe. You are creating your reality. I think it's such a great sign to see these and be like, okay, maybe there's more to this than I think, you know?
I love that. And it's something that I also like tell my clients, you know, in the spiritual community, we always say, oh, love and light, love and light. We're made out of love and light. And I'm like,
Yes.
we're made out of love is a safe assumption, but we're made out of light, that's science. Because exactly when you zoom, when you zoom into every single particle, you find exactly that wave, which basically like the entire universe is made up of the same thing. So we're like all interconnected. I love how grounded your approach is when it comes to manifestation. And you know what? I feel that people crave this grounded approach because we're so tired of hearing about, oh, just be happy, just fake it, just visualize yourself being there and you'll have it. So it's good to have this solid science-backed grounded approach to manifesting our desires. So what will be the first step, in your opinion, that we need to take after we have this understanding of starting to attract our desires into our lives?
The first thing that I think is so important is just observing what you're currently thinking and kind of getting a little meta on your mind and thinking, what am I thinking? And when you start to do that, you start to realize, actually, I'm a bit of a negative Nancy. I keep on thinking about all these terrible things that are going to happen in the worst case scenario. And often it's because we're conditioned to stay in our comfort zone, and anything that has been reinforced in our past, like failing at school or being laughed at for being a certain way, like that gets reinforced into us and that becomes familiar. And if we stay in that, you're going to just keep on creating that cycle. So be mindful of what you're thinking about. And if you're thinking about the worst case scenario, start to think, what if the best case scenario happened? What if I actually did manifest this, top of the class, or I manifested this raise, this pay raise? And there is no harm in just shifting your thoughts over, right? Because we all know that if you just start to give yourself that chance of like thinking, what if, you start to activate different areas of your brain wires differently, and you start to make different choices, different decisions on how you can get there. So be mindful of what you're thinking. Just be playful. I think that's the best way to get into this. Be playful and just say, well, okay, well, what if I didn't fail, you know? And then from there, start to tap in how you feel, because often we don't realize, but we live kind of as on autopilot, and we start to just feel fear because it's comfortable, because we've done it our whole lives and it's safe, it's predictable. Okay, I'm going to feel fear. Let me just do it now so I don't get my hopes up and I don't go through this painful experience. But what we don't realize is that when we're feeling that with universal logic, which is what I call a combination of universal laws and understanding that, you're going to attract more of that to your life, because what you think about and what you feel about is what you attract. We're all familiar with the law of attraction, or most of us are. And so if you want to start creating a new reality, you need to change what you're thinking and how you're feeling in alignment to the life that you wish to create.
I love it. So it's all about being mindful, seeing what comes up, and then being courageous enough to interrupt our thinking pattern, be playful
Yes.
about it, and allow ourselves to like see things from a different perspective. Now,
Mm-hmm.
what I love about like when I talk up to like manifestation experts is that we all have like a favorite process, or the process that worked
Mm.
best for us. And it's usually something that we read or that we evolved from reading, or something that we created ourselves. So I'm very
Yeah.
interested to hearing, what is your number one process? If you had to only give us a single process that will help us get maximum results when it comes to manifesting our desires, what's yours? What is that process?
So the part that I think is different with my process is that it's always about coming back to love, not necessarily joy, because we all have different emotions, right?
Yes.
I think that there's a very big emphasis on happiness being the creator, and I think that it does definitely create happy results. However, what and this is getting a little bit deep, but my understanding and the science behind this is that if we go to the first element of the periodic table, it's hydrogen, and
Yes.
hydrogen has a proton and an electron. It also has a neutron, but ultimately it's got a positive and a negative, right? Just in nature. That means that even at a fundamental level, everything is in balance, right? So in my own understanding and my whole journey, I've had times where I've been like, okay, I got to be happy all the time. Let me be happy. And I did for like 3 days. I was like, happy, 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 happy. I was going crazy though, right? And George, like after 3 days, I had this huge crash. I was like, Pam, I just felt low. I felt depressed. I felt angry. All of those negative emotions started to come in. And that was me coming into this thermostat of balance of like, oh my gosh, I really can't be happy all the time. So I realized I couldn't focus on joy being the model for manifesting because it wasn't sustainable. So I was like, okay, what's sustainable? What's grounding? And going back to this, I was like, okay, well, we know that atoms naturally have balance within them. And so if I could create a method that honored balance, that's sustainable. That's something that actually I could work with. And so what I do in my own method is seeing as I go through life, it's not about aiming just to be joyful all the time, but also this gives us a sense of relaxation, because it's like, oh, thank God I don't have to be happy all the time and go psycho, right? So it's about going through all the different emotions that life has to offer for us, like really enriching ourselves with those different feelings and those lessons, but ultimately transmuting everything back to love. So your happiness, when you're in joy, that can be transmuted to love. When you're angry, that can be transmuted back to love, because my definition of love is that it's the unification of all the emotions that already exist, right? It's seeing that there was both good and bad in any situation. There was perfection in every single moment, and that when you can embrace and step into that loving vibration, you become literally a channel to receive your desires. So it's about realizing that in those high moments, like, yay, I feel so good, but also bringing yourself to balance and asking yourself, what is the hidden negative here that I haven't really seen, but I'm accepting? So one I really love to use is, say you manifested $1,000, like just out of the blue. Maybe you got a raise, or maybe you have a bonus, and you're like, yes, $1,000. In that moment, it seems like it's just good and just joyful. So my aim is to come back to balance, is to be literally that atom and to see the two halves there. And so the other half of that is, well, I might have to pay tax. People might be jealous, but all of those things are okay, because I got to see that in every state, there's going to be both good and bad. And so in that moment, grounding that happy moment, I'm literally entering gratitude, because I see both sides simultaneously. And then gratitude is the key emotion to manifestation. Many of us have heard that. And so when you're in that state, you manifest and you burst through. Now, the same thing can happen when you're having a low moment. Say you're really angry because a friend taunted you, or a friend, I don't know, stabbed you in the back. in that moment, you got to realize, just like with the money, there was both good and bad. The same thing is true for that moment. So even though there was the bad, like you got stabbed in the back, what is the positive there? And often it's like, well, I learned a lesson that I need to have a stronger backbone, and I need to honor myself, and I need to have boundaries, and I need to love myself more. And so that was the positive that you don't see unless you do this step, right? And so once again, you see both the proton, the electron, the positive side, the negative side, and you literally come into a state of love, right? The unification of both sides. And then you enter a state of being a magnet for your desires once again. So that's where I see it as different, because we hear a lot from manifestation leaders, which for a long time I resisted this whole process, because I was like, but so many people teach that positive mindset is what gets you there. But it's not just positive mindset. There's another half. Negative thinking has a purpose in its own right, in the right circumstance, to ground you back to love. And I think that's really important. And that's what I have found has helped me to create my dream life the fastest and collapse time, you know?
And it's just so kind towards ourselves when we don't expect ourselves to be happy 24/7. And when we let ourselves feel negative emotions and know that all we have to do is transmute them. And I had an epiphany while you were talking. You talked about gratitude. And I realized, oh my God, gratitude is transmuting. Because you can be grateful about something that positive that happened, and then you can also be happy, grateful about something negative that happened, because you're like, I'm grateful that even though I went through this negative experience, I'm still alive and I can get to try tomorrow. So instantly you transmute it into love.
Yes.
Oh, that's just like mind blowing.
Boom, right? And then you're no longer like, oh crap, I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm repelling my manifest. You don't have to be worried about that anymore, because even you say this, it's about your principle is dominant emotional state, right? And my understanding is, you know, coming back to love, it's that understanding that you don't need to pardon yourself if you're feeling down.
Yes, the way I teach it is it's basically the same concept, just different words. I talk about the difference between pleasure and happiness. Pleasure being basically what you're talking about when it's just something ephemeral, and then happiness being synonymous to the vibrational frequency of love, which essentially is all about coming back to love and light. And love and light encompasses joy and happiness and all that. But essentially, it is that love, that emotion, that frequency of who we really are. That's so beautiful. So what happens when we do the work, we use the process, we're thinking we're like using manifestation in a conscious way, but something doesn't work? In my experience, people sometimes either quit or they try harder. So how do we take a different approach to problem solving our manifestation?
Yes. Okay. So obviously we already know off the bat, quitting doesn't sound like the best answer, because it means that you just kind of throw the towel and you didn't learn your lesson and you didn't. So I always believe that if it's not working, in my understanding, it means that you're going through a lesson to gain a trait, to gain an attribute, so that once you've got your manifestation, you can actually handle and deal with it. Because there's nothing worse than manifesting $1 million and then not knowing how to manage it, and then just squandering it down back to $100, you know? So I think instead of feeling angry that it's not working, be grateful, because you're learning a lesson, a specific trait that you must, so that you can handle it once you've got it. So obviously don't quit, but then also trying too hard can also do you harm too, because if you're thirsty for it and if you're like, okay, let me just try everything, you're not listening to your heart, because your heart will tell you things where you are in a sense of calm, there's a sense of balance, there's a sense of, I know this is what I should be doing, and you're going to feel almost like you know exactly what that first thing is that you need to do, right? So if it's not working, in terms of kind of problem solving this whole thing, I would say that you have to look at the different elements of manifestation. You know, there are so many elements, and The Secret, like we've seen, only covered a couple of those. But I think what The Secret definitely didn't say was the action part of it. And, you know, in my own experience, even just manifesting all of my accomplishments, there was so many actions that led up to that. And so I would always say, number one, just check, have you taken enough action? Have you done everything you possibly could? Because if there's still things that you could be doing, there's no excuse to say of why it didn't occur, right? So if I am like, I don't know, say I'm running something, or say you're a business owner and you want to run something and you want to have a certain amount of people join your course or whatever that is. If you're feeling down because you haven't got the number that you wanted, have you done everything? Can you go live? Can you do a podcast episode? Can you collaborate? Because ultimately there's still things on your part that you can do. So I think action is really, really important, but also making sure it's mindful action, in messy inspired mindful action, right? So making sure that you're not just doing anything willy-nilly, like trying to grab at everything, that you're actually asking your heart and your intuition, what do I feel called to do? And then when you ask your heart, what do I feel called to do, you're going to be led to things that maybe you didn't think about before. And from there, it leads on to something else, and from there to something else. And so I think that's the first thing that I would do. If it's not working, just asking yourself that, but making sure you're doing the feeling that it's already happened, feeling grateful that you already have it, because that's the true magnet of also letting the universe bring it to you.
Oh my God, hell yes. Especially when it comes to the action. You know, I love action. I mean, I wrote a book called Lightwork. It's Gotta Work, because it's all about
exactly
doing the actual work and not just sitting there, meditating, raising your vibration, being like, I'm manifesting my desire. I'm like, no, you're not.
Yeah.
Take action. Like, actualize that step. This is like so powerful. And you're right. Like, not many books teach about how to take action and the importance of taking action, because the universe may be like knocking itself down to provide you with everything, but if you don't actually get out of your comfort zone and take the action steps needed to bring that into manifestation, then you're just blocking the whole manifestation process.
Yeah.
So, which brings me to the question, is there a limit to what we can manifest?
I truly believe there is no limit. The only limit there is the limit you place on yourself. The only limit there is what you believe you can manifest. And so if you want to manifest a dream house by the beach or whatever, like, you totally can do it. And yes, it's going to take energy, and it's going to take an investment of your actions, and it's going to take shifting your mindset, becoming a new person, being more of who you are, and shedding beliefs. But when you believe that you can do it, it's only a matter of time before you're going to get there, in my own understanding. And from my own journey as well, being a 23-year-old student trying to build a business that was teaching manifestation, I thought that it was so far-fetched to build a 6-figure business or to even live off it. And within the first year, I hit that milestone. And because I knew deep down it was possible, I just needed to make those steps, right? And so now, a couple of years later, I now know that my biggest dreams, I'm just going to keep on expanding them. And once I hit that, I'll expand into a new one. So it's the same for all of us. You know, there is no limit. You're ultimately worthy of whatever you want, regardless of what you were told and how you were brought up. And it's just about owning your self-worth and stepping up to the person you need to be in order to receive them.
I love it. And for people who want to learn more about your method and how you work, you have a new course called Manifestation Basics. Can you please share with us a little bit about it?
Yeah, of course. So Manifestation the Basics is literally my baby. It is just so golden in my own heart, because it is the science. It is, ancient wisdom brought to light in a very modern kind of setting. And if you're somebody who you like hearing this stuff, but you also are very curious about the solid principles and you want something grounding, because often it's hard for us to fully believe until we have that, we kind of calm down that left side of the brain, which is very analytical and very logical. So the beauty about Manifestation the Basics is that it is literally action packed within 2 modules. You're going to get literally everything you need to know about the science of manifestation. It's going into also what we said, the light wave theory and the particle theory, in order to understand how you're creating your reality. And also we've got the manifestation within, and we actually have this is the worksheet. We have a beautiful worksheet that I actually created myself. And when you use this on a daily basis and you really pair that with the solid knowledge that you learn in MTB, you are set to manifest those specific desires that you actually want to manifest. And I've had girls do this and they've had crazy, really amazing manifestations, like their dream apartment, their dream launch for their ebook. And I think it's the amazing bread and butter of just manifesting in general. So I love it. Yeah, that's what Manifestation Basics is.
Where can people access it?
Oh, yeah. So if you want to access it, just head to my website. It's just kimberleywenya.com, or and you'll find it there under courses. Or if you head to Instagram, which I'm just at Kimberley Wenya, I'll have the link for it in my bio. But ultimately, it's, yeah, that's basically where you can find it. And it's really exciting.
And of course, all the links will be in the show notes so everybody can access them. Kimberly, thank you so much for coming on to the Lit Up Lightworker podcast. It's been such a pleasure learning about the science behind manifestation, and I can't wait for everybody to experience your magic.
Thank you so much, George. It's been a pleasure to be here.